Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, where we have a mission to wake the world up to what's possible, one brave word at a time. And here today to help me with that mission are some of the most amazing authors of a new book that we have coming out. This one is called Shaman Heart, Sacred Rebel. And you guys, Sacred Rebel is book 2 in a series that come from lead authors Stephanie Urbina Jones and Jeremy Pajer. And before I introduce the authors to you today, let me just say a ginormous thank you to Stephanie and Jeremy. We wouldn't be here without you two. And the mission that you have had for these books, the series of books, but also the bigger vision to bring us together and really lay our hearts on the altar of this project. I'm going to actually ask the authors a question about that today. It was much bigger than I even dreamed it could be, because you brought us together in Teotihuacan, Mexico, and we had this beautiful healing retreat together. And I just love you both so much. And I'm so honored to be here and be doing this with you. So I kind of wanted to start off that way today, you guys, because I think all of you three agree with me that, when you're led by heart-centered, passionate people, the energy just gets bigger and better. And Stephanie and Jeremy are those kind of people. So thank you to both of them. Who else do I have here in my Zoom room? Well, Dan Cook is a writer, natural life coach, student, and artist of life. I also have Daisha Alred Bond. She's an intuitive dream interpretation coach, bee shaman, energy healer, and end-of-life doula who works with clients through the cycles of living and dying. And Natalie Peterson is a communication fiend, author, and podcast host who has committed her ears and voice to helping others in their pursuit of clarity, connection, community, and ultimately congruence. Natalie, Dan, Daisha, thank you so much for being here. Dan, we're going to start the party with you. Tell us about your amazing chapter.
Thanks, Laura. Good morning. And writing that chapter was a little bit of delving into some of the most painful areas of my life and really trying to get into the state of mind that I was in, really going back to some insanity, to be honest, in order to write this chapter.
Oh my God, Dan, going back to insanity to write your chapter. So and you're willing to go there. A lot of you are warriors just to say yes to a project like this and actually write your hearts and souls out on pages for the very first time. Was this the first time you had written your story?
It was the first time I had written probably that part of the story. I had done quite a bit of writing, I would call it internal journaling type work about what all had happened during those years. But I had never really put it together with a bow on top with what I had learned out of it, what I had extracted out of that experience. It was like I went out into the forest or into the wild, and I came back into the world. And it's only important if you do that and bring something back, right? It's only if I can bring something back from there that someone would relate to or understand or be able to apply to their experience. And so hopefully I've done that with chapter 21. So, I encourage, if you went through a rough time in relationships, or you went through a rough time in depression, or you've experienced psychosis or something like that, or had some weird paranormal events happen in your life, come check out my chapter. And so, it's, you will, you might relate. And, what I came out of the other side of that with is a deep self-love and really an understanding and an experience that made it all
Oh my goodness, I love that. And no doubt it's going to help people who resonate, and you all are giving people permission to kind of be their full-on selves and feel whatever those intense feelings are. And Dan, you were brave to write some of the pieces of your story like you did. I have no doubt that people will be helped by that. Does that matter to you? Was the therapeutic process of it enough?
I pretty much live my life like an open book. So it's it was yeah, I had to go out there and be a little vulnerable on some stuff. And to be honest, I was a little concerned that my narrative might not line up with other people's narratives of the events, but at this other level, um, I that's how I experienced it, right? And that's kind of that's my narrative, how I felt it, how I experienced it while it was happening. Whether someone else standing in another place or another, saw it a different way, that's perfectly, okay. They have that's their story, and so I encourage them to write that, you know,
Yeah.
um, or share it. So, um, yeah, I mean, it was definitely therapeutic to write, but it was more therapeutic to experience and kind of move through that into where I'm at now. And these different rituals and events that we do um, are very powerful healing um, modalities, right? Like the trip to Teo that we did, for example. There were a lot of activities that, a lot of rituals and ceremonies that we had there, or witnessed, or behaved in, um, or participated in, that were definitely amazing. We have a lot of love for each other. And so when you get 25 people that know how to love themselves and know how to love each other, um, it's really pretty powerful. And I know I only knew a couple of the participants, but when I got home, I felt like I had um, a much wider soul family. You know what I mean? Like the 25 other authors are now in my soul family group. It's like these are brothers and sisters. I feel like we've done a tour of duty together, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
It
And
does.
some of that's dealing with trauma, and some of that is just loving wholeheartedly, right? Without, unconditionally, you know, and learning how to love in that way is an amazing thing.
It is. Dan, thank you so much for being here today. Stay tuned, you guys. We're going to talk to Dan again in a minute. Daisha, tell us about your chapter.
Hi, yes. So my name is Daisha Bond, and my chapter is chapter 6 in the book. It's titled Mother's Milk, Dream Tending, and the Wild Depths of Grief. And whew, it was a doozy to write. And to experience. My chapter is about a trip that I went on to Mexico prior to our writing journey, to the jungle of Mexico. I was there with the bugs and the scorpions, and our shower was like a trickle of water, and Hurricane K blew through, and there were moments where I was literally asking my husband and my husband Kenny and my close sister friend Dusty Rose. I was like, "Am I dead? Like, am I dead? Are we all dead?" And we all had this crazy wild experience in this little village. And at the root of it, what Mexico was, this area of Mexico, this portal was bringing to me was the medicine of working through my own grief, grief that I had not dealt with in regards to my father's suicide. And then even more surprising was this trauma I didn't even really realize I was holding on to was the loss of it was a miscarriage, a late term miscarriage. So my chapter is about, again, dream tending through the wilds of grief, working with the dreams. That's kind of the medicine I'm bringing to this book, working with the language of dreams and the language of the land. I really do believe that divine source speaks to us through nature. And I feel, I really tried to capture that in this chapter of the book, showing a timeline of how nature speaks to us, how divine source speaks to our hearts to help us heal.
So, I don't know what parts of this you want to talk about, but you had an extra challenge when you joined us in Mexico. And I love the way that Dan described, when you get a group of people who know how to love themselves together and they know how to love each other. Like, I think that just the big energy magic can be made. And then we had Daisha arrive with this specific challenge that I will let her tell you about, but I want to know how that process went down for you because of what you had to experience while you were there.
Yes, another doozy.
I know.
So, I arrived, with these kind of specific expectations for how this beautiful event was going to push forward, and that I was going to be surrounded by these beautiful brothers and sisters to tell my story, to find my story within myself. But the universe had a different plan. Literally, like, we arrived, I believe it was on a Friday or Saturday. That very next morning, I woke up and I could not even get out of my bed. I was so sick, so sick. Jeremy came in and tested me, and unfortunately I had COVID, and then later found out that I also had the flu. So I had the flu and
I didn't know
COVID.
that.
Yes, the day 2 days before I had left, a couple of folks that I had been in contact with had they tested positive for flu while I was in Mexico. So had the double whammy and had to be in isolation the entire time. And it honestly, I knew, like, I get visions, and it's almost exactly a year prior, I had been in Teo with Stephanie and Jennifer Harvard from Gaia Sisterhood on another retreat. And I had already done the excursions that the rest of you were doing, but I was so heartbroken. There were so many levels of, again, grief that I was working through, but also working through a lot of childhood trauma around abandonment, around not trusting my body, not knowing if I could trust adults to care for me. Like, there were so many things that were popping up. And I will tell you, the day that you all went to Frida's house, her house, and the basilica where Our Lady of Guadalupe was, they both came to me in my room. And in my room, ironically, there were two beds that were facing each other. So I was like so feverish and sick, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to just make the best of this. So I made one of my beds my day bed, and one of the other bed was my night bed, just like Frida. And they both came to me in visions, and Guadalupe very clearly said, you have already done those things and you are here for a reason. Trust that, trust us, trust our people and our land and our culture to heal you and take care of you, take care of your body, your mind, your soul. And it was a huge deep dive into trust. And significant, like, really specifically, it was about trusting the divine masculine as well. Jeremy was really the only one that could come up to see me, and I didn't even know Jeremy that well prior to this. And in my childhood, in my past, it has been males who I have a lot of trauma with. And I learned during this experience that this was to teach me to trust, that I could trust the divine masculine again. And he was such a wonderful caretaker. And so I kind of had my own vision quest, and I'm super grateful for it. There's no regrets. I walked away with such deep healing that I'm still integrating. And Dan, I'm so grateful for you too, because I had a little window by my day bed, and he would walk by. And it was like when you walk by, it was right head level where I was laying, where my pillows were, and he was just like, "I'm just checking on you." It meant so much just to have another presence, be there. And again, it was a male showing up, which was really beautiful. So thank you.
Yeah, Daisha, thank you for sharing that piece. And I had been wanting to hear you share about that since we got home. And so I appreciate you just entertaining the question today. And also I hope our viewers are hearing the awareness here and hearing how these warriors go about their lives, because I'm so honored to be around you all. You all are people who walk the walk of what we talk about every day. And I think Indatia's story is that for me. Natalie, tell us about your amazing chapter.
Hey, Laura, I'm so glad to see you and Daisha and Dan. My chapter 23 is titled Shot Through My Sacred Heart, reflecting on the truth of being exactly enough. It's a story I've been writing for so long, words, rattling around in my mind, but the real truth of it all being just out of my grasp until I had some help and some fellow journeyers to hold me and help me process it all. The time leading up to, around, and after my own father's suicide 27 years ago had an incredible impact, obviously, on who I am today. It wasn't until this author's journey in Mexico with Daisha and Dan and you and the others that I actually got my arms around the story of this whiplash. It was whiplash, literally hit from behind. And my dad's death was a moment of impact. I ran from the reality of it for most of my life. I numbed, I disassociated from the pain and the hurt and the unanswered questions. I played games with myself, with others, and I really packed the grief of it all into concrete in my soul. I lost one of the most important people in my life, and that was something that I didn't do so well dealing with. Not surprisingly, it's not a competition, but yeah, I ran pretty hard, and in my mind, I wasn't enough to save my dad. And that was something that I didn't take on until this journey with you all and the others. Today, I know I'm exactly enough. I know I was then. I know I am today. And for so many years, I ran from the concept of home, the concept of having a place of residence, where I could set up and be safe. Today, I'm home, and that's wherever my heart is. And that's something that this entire experience helped me realize. So
I appreciate the awareness here also on these topics. You're making me think of divine timing. You're making me think of this idea of looking back, and some of you might be thinking, oh, I wished I had dealt better with that back then, right? And then I think healers in general understand the divine timing of all of the things that we go through to get us to the place where we are, and we deal with it in perfect divine timing. Is there something else you want to say about that, Natalie, for you? Like, I know you recognize that too.
Well, I think so much of of my own story, I can speak from my perspective, is wrapped up in shame, and being able to, well, for me, a big chunk of my story is sobriety, and realizing, for me, it's been nearly 5 years of not engaging in any kind of substances. And the first several years of that time, I didn't do any healing. I just, stopped drinking. That was easy. Stopped doing the things that I was, but I didn't heal. I didn't deal. I didn't do any kind of reflection or deep dive into why I had been so disassociated for so many years. And it wasn't until the timing of paths crossing and hands being held out to, I tried different forms of therapy and different forms of self-help, and nothing clicked with me. And the timing of this, of Jeremy and Stephanie, and even before then, Tina Green, who was a big part of Freedom, Folk, and Soul, their perspective, as Dan had said, people have different perspectives on situations from their vantage point. And it wasn't until I had their perspective of my situation that helped me, keep working, knowing somebody's sitting beside me, the timing of somebody sitting beside me. You finally arrive at a place that's safe enough to dig into the pain. And it's fantastic pain. It's not easy.
Yeah.
But the pain, the release of that pain, with witness within witness of other people through the different ceremony and rituals and group work and individual work, the release of that pain, the timing of it, is something that you have to reach out and trust is for you, for the taking.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love what you said a minute ago about you finally reach a place that feels safe enough, and then, you can do the work in that safe space. That resonates deeply. Thank you, Natalie, for being here. And all three of you, thank you so much, not just for saying yes to this, which was already, telling me that you are warriors, but for taking on the challenge of writing this stuff in black and white in a book that other people could actually read and make sense of, right? That's a whole nother challenge. And it really does take an other level kind of person to say, yeah, I'll do that. I'll give that a shot. The writing piece is definitely part of this self-development journey. Like, am I good enough for other people to read this? And is it going to help people? And all the things that I'm speaking for myself that go through my mind when I try to write things. But I appreciate all of you so much for saying yes to that. So throughout this whole project, especially hanging out with Stephanie and Jeremy, I have heard the saying, we laid our hearts on the altar, so many times that I decided to ask y'all about it. So Daisha, what does that mean to you? And I want your personal take on what that's meant in a real, practical example. Like, what did that mean for you?
For me, it was about showing up authentically. I have written pieces in the past where I'm talking about myself, but I was hidden behind, fictional characters. And so this was so different because I had to really crack myself open, but also do so and have my name attached to it. So it was just a whole other level of vulnerability, and it really was a very clear choice that had to be made. Like it because there are things that I wrote in this chapter that my family back home, they don't know. There are many people close to me that don't know these pieces of my story. And so it was just that. It really was cracking the heart open, laying it out on the altar, as a sacrifice. It was very painful going back and revisiting these stories and working through the trauma that lives in our bodies, physically live in our bodies, I believe, somatically, working to release that. And well, it was really beautiful, and it's very painful. It's definitely a sacrifice, a true sacrifice, and you have to be willing to make the choice to do it, to show up, bleed on paper, bleed on paper. But I am so grateful. I said before, I have no regrets. I really don't. I feel completely changed. I feel completely changed, but at the same time, completely more of me, more whole. Because I have taken this step to step more into my power and step more into authenticity.
Natalie, what has this meant to you?
Laying my heart on the altar is really being seen in my vulnerability, in my absolute most raw and fragile and imperfect mess of a self. I've personally rocked the perfectionist lifestyle. And
Anyone else? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And when you work so hard day in and day out to hide behind masks of being everything to everyone except yourself, and someone asks you to honor yourself with your truth and with trust, that's a heavy lift. It brings tears to my eyes. The world works against being that vulnerable. And there's, the voices and the choices that we make that are based on other people's opinions, can be so much to work through to finally get to a place where you honor. It's about honoring yourself and finally finding peace in your truth. That's what laying my heart on the altar meant to me.
And you're right that it's a heavy lift. Dan, I know it's probably hard to go last on this question, but what's your version of this?
Well, I tell you what, I do have something, and so I'm going to show you. I went to the forest to an event, and I don't know if you can see this, but it says "Empty this story," and I too had suicide be a big part of my personal story. So first, my grandfather committed a murder suicide that started my venture into recovery. And then in 2018, my dad committed suicide. And I felt like it was, it was setting up destiny that I didn't want to have any part of. And I didn't want it to affect me, but it affected me. And I was also kind of, my fourth big love relationship was coming apart, and that fourth one had really been the red pill for me. if you will, that had snapped me a little bit out of or really the destruction of it had ended up being the red pill that had snapped me out of, all these stories. We are storytellers, right? And so I had all these stories that I live by, and they were my family stories, and some of them were my stories, and all these narratives. And yeah, and I laid that stuff on the altar. And this woman Joy gave me that painting, and it's kind of a rough little painting, right? Empty this story. And how powerful is that, right? To just lay it all out there. And so much healing came personally from that, just laying it out there and emptying it out. And it emptied some of the emotion from it. Even my own story doesn't totally define my now. Okay. My past does not define my now. And I just, in my last 5 years, I've really learned what self-love is really about. And, it's that acceptance, appreciation, attention, affection, and approval of me, not of the rest of the world. It's me giving those things to myself. And when I can give those things to myself, unconditionally, I live the most beautiful life you could imagine. And I'm not, I'm not bothered by, other stuff going on in the world. And so anyway, it's amazing. I mean, that's what and then I show up, in my life. And I show up for y'all, and I show up for me, and I show up for my kids. I show up for my pets, my girlfriend. It's like, it's amazing. It is amazing. And who would have known? I mean, I didn't know. I didn't learn that at a young age. I learned that at a middle age. And at the same time, I feel very fortunate to have gotten to this place where I'm at this age in my life. I think some people may go to the grave never really understanding that deeply, right? Never experiencing that freedom. And and so a big part of it is about laying that stuff at the altar and surrendering it, right? Surrender is a huge concept that it's not really about winning. It's about being. It's not about more money. It's not about more. It's about just surrendering to what is. And anyway, that
we could go on.
Yeah, right?
I know.
I could go on for a long time. Yeah.
I questioned myself when I wondered about that question. And I want to say a very special thank you to the three of you right now for not only answering it, but being so freaking brilliant in your answers. You just went ahead and cannonballed into the vulnerability just now for everybody. And I thank you so much for being willing to answer that in that way that came right smack from your heart. You all are badasses in that way, seriously. I hope you know that. Natalie, I'm going to start with you for this last question. I'm going to come around to all of you. And, this is the question with this book. Like, what does it mean to you to be a sacred rebel?
It is about facing the unknown with confidence. It's about owning every piece of my, as I said, my beautiful hot mess of a self. It's about embracing the inner child, the young woman, the middle-aged woman, all the pieces of me that I abandoned. I didn't abandon myself on purpose. I I was doing what I thought was right for me at the time. And to be my sacred rebel self is to go back and grab those pieces of me and wrap them up inside of me and bring them to the front and celebrate them and honor them and let them teach and be a part of who I am moving forward.
And what is the thing that you want our viewers to know right now? What's the most important thing you want them to know about walking this walk on their journey?
We are each exactly enough.
That's a good way to put that, plain and simple. Thank you, Natalie. Dan, this question coming to you next. What does it mean to be a sacred rebel to you?
For me, it truly means being my most authentic self. I know a lot of people equate it to kind of being a wild teenager or like that kind of rebellion. But for me, it's a little bit more of having the courage, no matter how old you are, to really embrace and be who you really are in the world, not who I think the world wants me to be, or that, that perfect perspective, being what not being what other people want me to be or as other people see me, but really come as you are, right? Come as you are. And so yeah, I mean, for me, I am a bit of a sacred rebel. And and it's not that I'm pushing against the world. Really, uh, it's a little bit of sacred surrender to be who I am, right? Now, the part that pushes against the world is that the world wants me to, some people in their mind, they think that I'm this, but really I'm me, and there's no telling what I might do. It could be pretty random, and that's okay. And allowing other people to also be their most authentic selves, and loving them, and embracing that. And I think of all the people in pop culture, right? That whether it's Gaga or Britney or any of these people that kind of showed us a part of themselves that really wasn't. Uh, the norm, right? They stood out a little bit. And I would just recommend that people liberate that part of themselves that maybe they think that the world wouldn't quite understand. That's your unique superpower. And let it loose, just let it loose and be you. And I encourage people to and a lot of people don't know who they are yet, right? They're learning. And me too. It's always a learning. And so, yeah,
I love it.
that's my thought on Sacred Rebel. Just here I come, world.
I love it. I love it, Dan. Thank you. All right, Daisha, last on you for this question. What does it mean to you to be a sacred rebel?
Ugh. I think for me, it's about continuing to show up and dream big when there's so many folks in this world that, for one reason or another, will try to steal those dreams, will try to tell you that's not real or you can't do that. Stay in your lane, stay in your box. To me, showing up as a sacred rebel is trusting your heart, trusting your intuition, and taking the leap, going after the big dreams. And sometimes the leap and the bigness is actually more about a softening. That was one of the big things I learned about myself, was really finding the sacredness of stillness and silence, and how transformational even the smallest movements can be. One of the things that dropped in for me big time during this whole process was honoring the one note. And what I mean by that is honoring like the one note of a song. Like there's so much magic and potential and power in a single note, and really learning to mindfully honor that, honor the one note. And one last thing that I just would love to share, no spoilers, but in my story, I talk about these beautiful gifts that nature that showed up literally at my feet. They were gifts from the ocean. And I have them. I wanted to show, this is the little wallet that I speak to. It still has sand in it. And then also this gorgeous seashell. Like, it's so hard to believe even reading my story until you've seen it. But I would just say to people, you know, cynicism is a disease, and be willing to allow yourself to witness the miracles that are happening every day all around us. We just have to be open to witnessing and believing that it's real.
Oh boy, cynicism is a disease. I love that quote. Daisha,
Love that.
Dan, yeah, Natalie, thank you all so much for who you are and what you're doing in the world. And thanks for being here today. Share it with
Thank you,
everyone.
Laura. Thank
you,
you.
Laura.
Thank you.
So, you guys, I know something that one of these authors said to you maybe gave you the goosebumps, made you curious. Drop down into our show notes, because I have everyone hooked up there with their websites and their links. This is so much more than a book. This is a community of people who care, and people who are there for you to take the next step to support that. So please go check out and explore their websites, see all of the awesomeness that they are up to, because it's a lot. And it is amazing, and you are all so amazing. And of course, please remember you can join us for our book launch party. It's going to be on Zoom Friday, June 2nd at 10 a.m. Eastern, where I'm going to gather with all of the Sacred Rebel authors, and we're going to be having some fun celebrating this wonderful book. I've got the info on the Brave Healer Productions Facebook page, and that's down below for you as well. If you happen to be listening to this interview after that date, well, hop over to Amazon then, because that means the book will be ready for your purchase. And lastly today, everyone, I just want you to remember, your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So it is time to be brave. See you next time, everyone.
Thank you, Laura.